Thank you. Thank you for coming before the Select Subcommittee this morning, Dr. Tabak. We appreciate your testimony. We're pleased that the American people had a chance to hear from you directly today. The purpose of today's hearing was to have a transparent examination of the process in which NIH awards federal grants, conducts oversight on these grants. If we find things that we can do better, then that's where we want to go. And we're all subject to that. It was important to hear from the Deputy Director directly on this matter, especially as it pertains to EcoHealth Alliance. While investigating the origins of COVID-19, we uncovered very concerning behavior and wrongdoing by EcoHealth Alliance and its president, Dr. Peter Daszak. It was made all the more troublesome as EcoHealth had been awarded federal funding, taxpayer dollars, and were conducting research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Our investigation was essential, I should say, for uncovering this behavior and for laying out the facts for all to see. Because just 2 weeks after publishing our report on EcoHealth's wrongdoing, they now face an immediate government-wide suspension and hold on all taxpayer funds pending a formal debarment investigation. That's appropriate and a good result, in my opinion. I want to reiterate my proposal that NIH consider personally suspending EcoHealth President Dr. Peter Daszak, in addition to EcoHealth, from receiving federal funds and also be immediately suspended from the current federal funding. We understand, based on past history, the possibilities of natural origins of COVID and pandemic type of viruses. We recognize the need for surveillance, the benefits of enhanced predictability. We applaud those efforts. What is new and in need of greater study is the culpability and the capability of creating a pandemic or creating a pathogen that is capable of being more infectious. You know, even in 2012, in an interview when Dr. Fauci was questioned about gain-of-function research, and the question was, aren't you concerned about something getting out of the lab and creating a pandemic? He felt at that time that the benefits outweighed the risk and that the risk was small. I think we have greater concerns today when it comes to biosafety standards. And so there is a concern about biosafety standards throughout the world being inadequate. We need to address that as best we can as a nation. Not having control over other nations, that's a concern on who we engage with. So that's a concern throughout the world. So I appreciate, Dr. Tabak, you testifying today that not only is a lab leak theory not a conspiracy, but it's a hypothesis, and I'll use your words, that should be considered. I agree with you 100%, and I have felt that way from the beginning. And I've said in this committee from the very beginning that we need to consider nature and we need to consider a lab. Because the capabilities of creating something in a lab didn't exist 100 years ago when we had a pandemic. They didn't exist 50 years ago, but they do exist today. Look, I believe the origins of COVID will likely only be potentially resolved through intelligence, as testified by former CDC directors Redfield and Walensky. That's where we're going to figure it out. Why? Because China's not cooperative. And I agree with that because China's not been transparent, they've not been accountable, so it makes it very difficult. The threats of existing gain-of-function technology in the hands of bad actors is and should be a huge concern to every American and freedom-loving people everywhere. This is not to be taken lightly. When we had Dr. Fauci in a transcribed interview, I did question him on whether he said that the conspiracy theory is possible. But I asked him if he reviewed studies or scientific evidence related to that possibility of creating this in a lab. And he said no. I asked him, I said, are you familiar with the published research on the site-directed mutagenesis? He said, no, I'm not. Well, if you're open to we should be researching it. We should be looking at it. And many of us have been. I have since 2020, when I discovered that Ralph Baric with Zhengli in China created a chimera. That concern has been there for me since that time. We don't know all the viruses that EcoHealth and or the WIV, either with EcoHealth Alliance or independently or possibly with the PLA or with their Academy of Military Medical Science. We don't know all the viruses that they created. So for some here to say that it's impossible for COVID-19 to have originated from this work, that it's possible it didn't come from their work directly, but that's inconsistent with the known unknowns, including testimony from numerous public health officials and from Dr. Peter Daszak himself. So I appreciate Dr. Tabak testifying that we do not know everything that was occurring at the WIV and that we just had a window of insight. It's important that we recognize our vulnerabilities so that we can improve upon them in the future. I appreciate you, Dr. Tabak, and I appreciate you clarifying that the NIH found that their reporting system did not, in fact, lock Dr. Daszak and EcoHealth out of their account, which impeded them from submitting their report on time. That honesty is tremendously welcomed here. The more we look into Dr. Daszak and EcoHealth, the more concerned I get and the more untruths it seems to uncover, and we will continue our work. Today's hearing was important as we continue our investigation into the origins of COVID and the effects of the pandemic on the United States and the world, and work to uncover any impropriety by public health officials or grantees. You know, in a government of we the people, truth, justice, transparency, and accountability matter. And on that note, I thank you for being here today, Dr. Tabak. With that and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business, without objection, the Select Subcommittee stands adjourned.